And we are live. Welcome to Leadership Live. I've got a new guest, but before I get there, a couple of things that I need to mention today. We were supposed to have two guests. Luckily, one showed up. The other one, unfortunately, Chris Trebelkakis, not feeling well today. So we're going to tag team a little bit here, Jason and I. I'll get to that in just a second. If you have not watched Leadership Live before, the whole point of this is to talk about things that matter in a way that matters, specifically leadership and people, because we can't separate those two things.
Definitely not.
One more piece of housekeeping. If you have questions, if you're watching this on social media, we're streaming live on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Zoom, on Twitter, and I think a number of other places. We can't track all of them. If you have comments, if you have questions, as we go through today's session, text me, 734-837-8500. We'll use your questions, we'll use your comments as appropriate. So today's show is going to be an interesting one. We haven't covered this topic before. Jason, you and I have talked about it in a second. I'm going to introduce you in a sec. But what we really wanted to get to the heart of is what do leaders, what do CEOs need from CHROs and their teams? What do CEOs need from human resources? So I thought, what a better place to go is to get us a chief people officer, a chief HR officer, and I've got that in Jason. Jason, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it.
So I'm gonna give everybody a little bit of sense of your bio, and then we'll kind of get into some of this stuff. So Chief People Officer for Dawn Foods, the company you may never have heard of. However, it's in all of the candies and confection and stuff, ingredients.
Baked goods.
Oh, yeah. Baked goods, I'm sorry, baked goods.
Yep.
So when did you join there?
I joined there in 2014.
And you've got the global HR team, that's all, and you're supporting teams across Europe, Middle East, Africa, Latin America, North America. And I didn't even realize until you sent me this that you guys had as many employees as you did and as many places as you actually did.
Yep.
So you work with the board as well.
Correct.
Just tell us about that piece of it.
Yeah, so Dawn Foods is family owned. It's been owned by the same family for a better part of 80 years. And it's a 100-year-old company, and it's owned by the Jones family, which they're based in Jackson. Right now we're in third generation of leadership. I work for Carrie Barber, who's the daughter of the father of the founder, right? So the board is comprised of primarily family members, and we've got external board members as well that have served in the other chief financial officer capacities, CEO capacities, various backgrounds. So we've mixed up the board in a way that both honors the family, the tradition, and the legacy, as well as bringing external perspectives in as well.
Best of both worlds.
Yep.
But beyond that, you also have experience at Philips, GE, Armstrong World Industries.
Correct.
Flooring company.
Correct.
Right?
Flooring and ceilings, yeah.
Yeah. East Coast originally, Jersey?
Correct.
Was that, did I remember that right? You got your BA from Monmouth and Masters in HR from Rutgers.
Correct.
All right. Why are you here today?
You asked me.
No. I did.
No, actually, it's a topic that's near and dear to my heart, honestly, because you know, one of the things that I strive for, especially at this stage of my career, is making sure that my HR team and HR teams that I have the opportunity to influence connect with the business in the right way, and that's my main passion, right? So.
And that's why I thought, as we were talking, I thought Jason would be a really good fit for this, because when we think about what are CEOs, and I'm just going to say CEOs, but it's really all leaders. What do they need from their HR team? You can look at all kinds of surveys, you can look at all kinds of studies, and there's at least a half a dozen reports that I know came out in January. This is what HR needs to do. So let's toss all that off to the side for a second.
Yep.
From your perspective, as the chief HR officer, the chief people officer sitting right now, what does your CEO need from you and your department?
Yeah, so actually I'm going to go back. You know, the way what she needs and what the company needs actually is the same thing that my first boss needed. Came out of graduate school, as you said, Rutgers. Saddled with debt, you know. It's important to know because, you know, my first boss's words of wisdom just resonated with me. He sat me down. I really hadn't even started yet, and he said, "Listen, Jason, you can take all that HR stuff that you learned in college, in graduate school, and just throw it out the window, until
After you just went into debt
After
for
I just went
all
into
that
debt,
education.
yeah. In the back of my head, I'm just like, man, I could have used that knowledge
Before I
3 years
spent all
ago. But anyway, so he said, no, you have to do 3 things for me, and then you can do all your HR stuff. And it's in this priority order: know the business, know the people, and never let me get surprised.
Know the business, know the people, and never let me get surprised.
Correct.
Okay, expound.
Yeah. So from a know the business perspective, understand how we make money. How does this plant?
Wait, you're in HR. Why the hell do you need to know how to make money?
Because whatever you do as an HR person, or whether you're an accountant, or whether you're safety, or whatever, if you don't do something that's going to help the business make money, then you're not going to have a job, tomorrow. Okay. So know how we make money, and then know the people within that business, and not from an administrative perspective. Know them. What drives them? What's their role? What are their roles? How do they fit into this puzzle? And the never let me get surprised piece might seem, intuitive, but at the end of the day, I view, and I would say a lot of the research would say, the chief HR officer's responsibility is to be the chief strategist, people strategist for the CEO, to be able to look ahead and see where there's pitfalls from a people perspective that they may not see, and then also be able to impart, advice to the leadership team from a people perspective, but more notably from a business perspective. So don't let your leader get surprised. And those 3 things are exactly those things that my CEO wants from me today and wants from our function. She wants, the leadership team wants the function to understand what we do and how we make money. Because if we start throwing out programs, whether they're total rewards programs, D&I programs, or anything like that, if they don't have a connection to how we make money, they're worthless.
You actually referred to this earlier. It's kind of like on one side of the coin you have, here's my business strategy. Mm-hmm. On the other side you have, here's the results I want to achieve. Mm-hmm. Now you've got equipment and all the, especially in your business and all that, but what's the thing that's getting you from this to this?
Right. It's actually even more broad than that. So yes, you have the business strategy. I wish I had a whiteboard, but you have the business strategy, and then you've got your results. But before the business strategy, you've got the customer, the market. Yeah. What are those dynamics that go into that business strategy? And then as you're formulating the business strategy, you then have this workforce strategy, right? So what kind of capabilities do you want? What kind of teams do you want? What kind of people do you want in your business to service the business strategy to then meet your customer demands? And then you keep going and you say, okay, then what's my HR strategy to service the workforce strategy? Because very commonly, people will say, oh, workforce strategy is HR strategy. No, they're not. They're 2 separate things. Because the workforce strategy can actually be affected by and have inputs from all different functions within the business. Mm-hmm. Manufacturing, supply chain, purchase, anything. And then you've got your analytics, and then you got your results on the other end of it. So I hope I built out that framed that out a little bit more.
It's interesting the way that your original boss put that is then you can start the tactics of HR. Right. Because one of the questions was, around HR has all of this expertise, very aligned to HR, but you just answered kind of the second piece is the leaders want the business acumen before the individualized, here's what we do within HR.
Correct. Yep.
How often does some of the more specific disciplines within HR come into play when you're having a conversation with your CEO?
They actually come into play quite a bit, because even though we're having broad conversations around business, and just yesterday I was talking to my CFO on the ride home from work on the phone, and we were talking about all these different levers from a financial perspective to then look at our total rewards. Yeah. Our total rewards plans and how we, position them in a different way possibly in the future to affect more results. So I'm talking to her during that time. I'm talking to her about total rewards programs, LTIP programs, short-term incentive programs, merit programs, performance measures. How do we tie performance to other financial results? So within that conversation, we were talking about 3 or 4 different functionalities within HR.
In support of it.
Right. And so, but it's got to be a very fluid conversation, because it can't be a one-size-fits-all conversation or a one-trick pony conversation. For sure. Because that's the death nail of HR. or any function for that matter, whether it's accounting, whether it's HR, purchasing, what have you, marketing, if it's not tied to some financial lever from the business, then it doesn't enact change within the company.
Since you bring that up, and it's kind of out of order, I know we had some of these questions that the audience submitted to us beforehand, but again, if you have a comment, if you have a question you want to ask Jason in particular, text me. My phone's here, 734-837-8500. But from a kind of what's next from an HR perspective, in what you're describing in terms of understanding the business, do you believe most HR leaders have that purview? And I know this is subjective. I completely get it. I'm just curious, as a sitting CPO, what do you think?
I think that it's a mixed bag, because I think it depends on several things. One, it depends on where were you educated, and that could be either school or were you educated in a business. For example, I was educated in a university that was well known from an HR practices perspective. But within that, I had a professor. I had 3 or 4 professors that I will take knowledge from them till I'm done with my career. I had a guy who was the former president of the Electrical Workers Union in New Jersey. I had someone who was a chief HR officer that retired. And I had somebody who used to work for Jack Welch, who designed the workout process, as professors, right? So the knowledge they imparted in me was all practical based. It wasn't based in theory. It was practical based. There's nothing wrong with theory as long as it's based in some practical application, right?
And you know how to apply it.
And you know how to apply it.
Yeah.
And you see how it's applied. But then, I was educated also by my first boss. And then what the expectations were thereout. So all the companies I worked for had powerful HR houses. They were known as, and they were respected as, powerful HR partners or partner. I don't like that word because you're a business colleague, right? You're part of the business. I'm not your partner. I'm your associate. I'm your colleague. I work with you, right?
That's interesting because just going off subject for a second, the HR business partner title is kind of new in the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years.
Right. I think it's because I think, and again, this is one thing that finance is the same thing. Finance has the moniker financial partner.
Yeah.
As opposed to just, I am your colleague. How many times do you have the president of a business unit being called the partner to the CEO?
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah, you don't.
Right? Chief marketing officer, how many times do you hear chief marketing officer or the marketing person call it as the marketing partner? Never. Because they're looked at as direct levers of the business. And sometimes other functions, if they don't demonstrate that acumen or don't demonstrate that ability to pull levers for the business, sometimes they try to have a title to get them in the door, which is fine.
Yeah.
But then once you get there, you got to deliver, right? So I know we veered off topic there for a second.
So going back, so the first one was the education, the practical education,
Right.
and in particular the 3 professors that you had.
Yeah. So, and again, I think HR folks globally, it's a mixed bag in terms of who's ready for that. Where HR should be, or where they can be, but I would say that that COVID and the pandemic and all the stuff that's happened in the last couple of years provided an opportunity for HR professionals and HR leaders to show their moxie at the table, because they were pulled on for very specific things that HR is really, really good at, right? Or they should be good at, in terms of taking care of the organization, right, and safety and health and well-being and so on and so forth, and all the different things that we should have been delivering in terms of reward programs, benefit programs, et cetera, that are taking care of our employees. Now, I'm not saying taking care of from a motherly or fatherly perspective, but it's like this is the opportunity that you have to then get into it, right? So. So I think now we're in a very good position as a function to deliver, as long as we don't lose sight of the fact that we have to understand how the business now operates. Because now, we've been through the pandemic, been through a lot of other upheaval, right? But now we've got inflation, you've got the future looking forward from a business perspective, and all the kind of headwinds that are there.
Oh yeah.
Now you've got to understand really the business. So now it's putting all the stuff from the last couple of years and all the stuff in the future, and then slamming it together to deliver for the business.
And business continues to change. I mean, even think about simple things like the new chat AI stuff.
Yep.
I mean, how is that? We don't know. It's brand new. We don't know the GPT stuff. So that's absolutely brand new.
But I think that's exciting though, because that provides an opportunity for HR to now, and also, I mean, finance, HR, if you look at different things that some of the service functions within the business are asked to do, some of them are repetitive, some of them are administrative. You can use technology to unburden the function from doing that, and then they can now show value in other areas.
Create efficiencies, give them the time back, as long as you use that time in the right way, for the right reasons to support that business.
You don't create other administrative duty or administrative tasks to supplant the stuff that just got replaced. But now you have to deliver for the business and what the business wants looking forward.
So let me keep going along the lines of, in terms of the importance of HR, where HR should be focusing. And you gave us your answer around, hey, understand the business. We've got to figure out a way to help drive profitability, because let's face it, without profit, or whether you're a for-profit or a non-profit is a misnomer.
If you don't make money,
you're screwed either way. It doesn't really matter. But every year, Gartner does their top priorities for CHROs, for CEOs, and so on. And this was their top priorities list for 2023 for CPOs, CHROs. And at the top of the list was manager and leader effectiveness. They said that was the #1 priority for HR.
I'd say it's a priority.
Okay.
I wouldn't say it's the top priority.
Okay.
Because again, I understand that perspective. I would also look at the Korn Ferry research that's been done, where CHROs as the CEO's chief strategist, or a partner. If you again, I don't like using that word, but there's so many different things that go into what HR's priority is, but using that example specifically, I think it's a top priority for us as a company as well, because if you look at what goes into manager leader effectiveness and then what the outflows of that are. So if again, I go back to my spectrum, we talk about the market, talk about the business strategy, and this is where you get into the workforce strategy. What type of people do you want in your organization? What type of...
Because of what you're trying to achieve in the first place.
What type of capabilities do you want?
Yeah.
Well, who's going to lead those capabilities? Managers, leaders, and so on and so forth. And they have to do it in a very effective way. Why? Because if they're not effective, then the people that they're leading then can't deliver for the customer, or their ability to deliver for the customer is hampered because their leaders aren't effective enough. Right, so then you have to start putting those tools, again, if you think about workforce strategy, HR strategy, now you have to say, okay, what are the because there are a couple questions about learning and development and training. What are the different things that you're going to put in place to enhance that effectiveness that then ultimately impact the customer and put people in the right place? Because also in the world that we live in right now, and probably, I mean, it's changed forever and for always. I mean, I don't think it's ever going to go back to any semblance of what it was in 2019 or earlier.
Agreed.
But because I think, honestly, it exposed some innate problems in our organizations where leaders could kind of get away with not being effective, right? Because there was an ample amount of supply of people, or a more ample amount of supply of people out there to then replace positions if people left. Now, people are gold.
Yeah.
I mean, platinum.
The market's still tight.
I mean, platinum, whatever you want to call it. I mean, very, very valuable. So the only way you get to keep those valuable assets, and I don't want to call people assets because they're not, because they're delivering for the customer, because the only way you get to keep those people so that the customer is now happy is by having effective leaders, managing or leading those folks, and therefore your business then remains stable if you have those levers in place.
Go back to one comment though. You just said. You said assets, and you said you don't like that term assets. Tell me why you don't like that term assets. I think it's relevant to the way we treat our people, to the way HR engages with people, to the way the businesses engage with people. Why do you say that?
Because assets implies, again, this is more my opinion than anything. It's an asset is not. It's more of it's like hard. And people aren't that. I mean, people are valuable to the company.
Yeah.
But if we look at them as assets as opposed to people and valuable people, right, that we treat them differently because assets can be replaced. people can't be replaced as easy as they used to be.
No.
Especially when you talk about knowledge. When you talk, especially in our business, we've got several different functions within our business that are extremely valuable. We call them our frontline workers. I mean, you wouldn't think that an organization would put so much emphasis on that, but our front line, our drivers, our CDL drivers, not because they're hard to replace, right? Because we have actually pretty low turnover for CDL drivers. Our turnover is in the 20% range, whereas the industry is like 90%.
And higher.
Yeah. So it's like, but our CDL drivers are the first people that our bakers see in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, and I've driven on these routes with these drivers. They look at those folks as the front line to them on getting us feedback on how our product is performing or not performing, as well as the sales rep, as well as other levers. But
sure.
That driver, yes, could be viewed as an asset, but they're a person. They provide value, and it's their value that they deliver to the customer that we want to, treasure and hold on to.
The reason I asked that is a CEO.
I hope I answered
you did. And the reason I asked that is the CEO last week, it's related to this, but he was talking about having a conversation with his CHRO and talking about their team members are all assets, and I cautioned him on that, and I said, well, what happens with an asset that you don't invest in? If I don't do anything with cleanness, eventually it depreciates, it's a piece of garbage.
Right.
So I agree with you. I think we've got to look at our people, and one of the mistakes that we often make by mistake is that we do look at our people as an asset, and it depreciates, instead of looking at it as a constant investment. And it was related to what he was asking his CHRO to do for that particular business. And as I dug deeper and dug deeper, there was a bigger disconnect between what HR was supposed to be doing in terms of driving the business profitability, all the stuff that you're talking about, and it was really viewed in the moniker of it's just all the stuff you do for our people without tying it back to the business. So there was already a disconnect across the entire thing. So I was just curious to what your opinion is on that. So if the original question was, is this one of the primary functions of what HR needs to focus on in 2023 is leadership and development and so on, whatever you want to call it, and the importance of that in driving the business. You said that very, very eloquently. So what do we do about it, though? Because there is a gap. There's no question in every organization across the country, and I believe across the world, there is a gap. What should HR be doing about that gap?
I think what HR should be doing, one, it's not just what HR should be doing, it's what the organization should be doing. Because I think if you focus on, and this is one of those, it's one of those paradoxes, right? So HR traditionally, in traditional senses, is looked at as the function to go do these things, right? But if the CEO or the organization views HR as the one that does these things, they're going to fail, because it's what the organization needs to do to make these things happen. Now, what HR can do to help that along is provide the right tools, advice, coaching, the levers that the organization can use to increase effectiveness of leaders.
So now I can't just call you as my CHRO and say,
go do that?
Jason, figure out a way to train all of our people to be better leaders.
Well, you can call me. I'm going to then correspondingly talk to you about that and say, I hear you. What ultimately is our end goal, right? Because I can put together the best training program for leaders known to man. But if it's not tied, or if it's not endorsed by, or led by the organization and leaders, then people aren't going to believe it. They're going to look at it as an HR thing, not a business thing.
But you've got an L&D department that is supposed to be doing that, don't you?
Right. But with an L&D department, if they put on a training program that's, for example, is not kicked off by the CEO or the chief of that department or the business or whatever.
CFO, whatever it might be.
Whatever it might be. It doesn't have as much punch. It doesn't have as much value. People look at it as a check-the-box thing, as opposed to this is an important thing, right? So if you have
another thing HR just wants me to do.
Well, you should do that, because all leaders are HR people. That's the thing.
I would agree with that.
Every person that's a leader should have an HR mentality in the traditional sense.
Say that again, right into the camera. Say that again.
all leaders should have an HR capability within their brain, right? Because you lead people. And I'm not going to be there for every interaction you're going to have with people. One, you don't want that. Because if you do, then there's an issue. Because then why do I need you as a leader? I might as well lead your people.
Yeah.
But that's the power. When you're leading your people from a point of view of a traditional HR person where I'm taking care of their performance, I'm taking care of their well-being, I'm taking care of all that stuff, that person is so committed to you, they're never going to leave you because they believe in you.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's the power of, I mean, people want to believe in their leaders. They want to believe in HR. I mean, where's the power in that?
Unless you're in HR.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I want my people that I lead. I want my people that I lead to
right.
believe in me and
Right.
to buy into buy into me. But then all of us have to buy into what the CEO wants or what the business
My
unit
department
president
leader wants, or whatever the case
right,
might
because if we can't follow them, and all I'm following is my functional leader, but my other leaders aren't really leading the company, then I'm following the function. I'm not following the business.
So get even more practical then. I mean, I get the, hey, if you're doing this for the chief marketing officer's organization, they started it off, but okay, that's one thing. Continue with that practicality to make an L&D, because of that gap that's there, to make L&D much more effective. What happens after that? So the CMO goes up, she opens up the event, L&D you create this great program, but now what?
Well, now you've got, and again, I'll go back to something that we just recently did. So we launched leadership behaviors.
Okay.
Within our company, and you could very, very easily say, okay, HR launched leadership behaviors. Well, it's an HR program.
Yeah.
Right.
What's the point? What's
Right.
the ROI?
And where's it connected?
Yeah.
Right. But when you have the CEO, the CFO, the business unit president, all the business unit presidents talking about all the different leadership behaviors within their strategy of how they're going to drive their business to the next level, then it becomes more connected to what they're supposed to do. Then, again, to facilitate that conversation, we call it people and culture department, not learning and learning and development, but our people and culture department put on a fantastic program where they facilitated different work groups to talk about our leadership behaviors and what we're looking to drive in the business. And it was facilitated by both people and culture folks, HR folks, and then non-HR folks. And they were all collaborating together cross-functionally, cross-functionally, cross-country, all geography. And they were talking about how they're going to then apply these leadership behaviors in their business situations they have back in their function. And they talked about it, and they committed to it, right? But the only reason why I was successful is because the CEO was talking about it, I was talking about it, the leadership team was talking about it as part of their broader strategy.
Because they understood the impact of what it was going to mean for them if they did it,
right.
and mean for them if they
didn't. And going back to the leadership effectiveness.
Yeah.
If we have leaders that are behaving in the right way, not right way from a compliance perspective. I know our attorney's not here. He would talk more about compliance,
but for sure.
But if they're behaving in the right way to drive the business, to lead people that are going to affect our customers, then we'll have much better results.
We should have had Chris call in, because I got texted on this, and it was actually one of the things here as well. Then I'm just going to bring it up since you mentioned him, not having an attorney. But I'd like to get your perspective on it, because it ties into some of this. Because there's somewhat of a pervasive view, and I think a lot of it's because of the way that too many HR leaders don't look at their role in the business.
Right.
That HR becomes more of a cover your ass kind of situation.
I'm from Jersey. It doesn't matter.
I figured you'd be okay with that. I don't want to be too offensive, but it's in many organizations it has kind of that. Now there's something to be said about the importance of that piece, and Chris would weigh into that. But I know we're veering off again, but it's one of the questions that kept coming up is, what's the role in kind of keeping the company out of trouble, and does that translate to profitability and other stuff?
Yeah.
I think I know the answer. But
yeah, I mean, to say that it doesn't tie to profitability would be a misnomer, because if you look at all the class action lawsuits and all the payouts and other things like that, it affects the bottom line. But the way I view the compliance nature or the inherent nature of our roles from a compliance perspective, I view those as table stakes. Those are requirements.
Those are the basics.
Those are the basics.
Yeah.
You got to be able to do that to be able to do anything else, right? Because if you can't pay people on time, if you don't have benefits that work, if you're in non-compliance with the law, if you're in trouble with the government, if you just layer it on out. One, you're not gonna be able to do business.
Yeah.
But so you've got to be able to do those things right, and that's where HR leaders, I would say, don't use that as your main lever in the business. That is a lever that you have in the business, but it's something that it's an entry point. It's like
my cost of entry to get into the
it's
role.
Like it's like ethics,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you got to be ethical. You got to tell the truth. You got to be, you got to, as a leader, right? So you have to be someone that someone believes in and trusts as a leader. If you're not that, then you can't be a leader.
True.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the original, because again, somebody texted about this, and it's actually the next question that somebody had originally sent over to us. Your position, and I'm paraphrasing here, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, is HR is a catalyst for the business, can definitely affect profitability, needs to understand how the business makes money in order to support the business the right way. If that's the case, what's the scorecard that an HR department should have to know if there's an ROI from the money that Dawn is spending on you and your team, that GE is spending on their teams? What should HR be measured against?
Yeah, again, this is where I will thank everybody that I've worked for and with in my past, because I've been blessed to work for some great HR leaders, and I've worked for some great HR houses that I learned this in these businesses and from these leaders. But how HR should be measured, every program you develop or every initiative that you have should have some semblance of return from an ROI perspective or affecting the business in some way. I'll give an example here in a second. Just recently, my team and I, we developed our HR strategy. I said every objective that we have has got to get tied to OI, sales, or some semblance of business. It's got to be tied back there, and it can't take 4 or 5 different steps to get there. It's got to be like 1 or 2.
Pretty clearly aligned.
Right. It's got to be very clearly aligned.
Revenue, this is how we do it.
Right.
Sales, this is how we do it.
So I'll give you an example. So one of the questions was talking about HR outsourcing or outsourcing portions of HR. We did that 3 or 4 years ago. We outsourced our recruiting function. At the time, it made business sense when it happened. The ROI was there. In terms of cutting the headcount, outsourcing it, stopping using third parties, et cetera, et cetera. So we partnered with somebody, and then over the years, it just became too cumbersome. It was slow, and the business was not happy with it. And then very recently, within the last year and a half, it was really affecting our ability to do business. So
by keeping it outsourced.
By keeping it outsourced, because we couldn't fill jobs fast enough, and we couldn't find the right people. So it was one of the best conversations I ever had with a financial leader. We were talking about, okay, we could frame up, we could bring it back inside. Here's what that's going to cost, X hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then that's what we're going to need to bring it back inside, because we're paying this for our, this and this costs more than this.
Sure.
But the finance person and I were talking about it. He goes, yes. However, because we can't fill our lines, and because we can't fill jobs on our lines are not producing enough product. Therefore, we can't sell product. Therefore, we've walked away from millions of dollars. I'll spend $400,000 on your recruiting department to make $5-10 million. And that's what we did. And it was beyond just that. It was also looking at third-party freight for driver positions that were left unfilled, for other positions that were left unfilled. They all have a cost, because we still have to deliver our product. So then you have to go third-party freight instead of having internal
triple
folks.
the cost for third-party freight sometimes.
Yeah, triple, quadruple. I mean, especially in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Right. So that insourcing and that model paid for itself like that.
So
and that's one example of how you got to use a financial model to justify what you just invested.
Yeah, and you showed you could show some level of ROI. Now that sounds like your financial colleague was a bit more progressive than maybe some others who are always looking at just the cost, not the opportunity cost. If you're talking to one of your counterparts as a CHRO who's dealing with that now, any advice on how they should approach that financial person?
I would actually, I mean, and I actually gave this very advice to somebody not too long ago, one of my peers at another company, and they were struggling with how to do just that. I said, well, spend time with your finance person. Spend time with your business colleagues. You know, spend time with them, understand the business. That way you're talking their talk. You're not talking your talk, right? Because if you're talking your talk, they don't want to hear that.
HR talk?
Yeah, HR talk. But finance gets in the same predicament.
Yeah, they do.
Like, you know, they have finance talk, or they've got, you know,
we get marketing talk.
Yeah, I was gonna say marketing talk's got their talk. But you got to be able to break it down, not because you want to be simplistic, but because in your head you're talking about all these different things. You have all these different acronyms, and the people that are around you. Even my CEO, she's like, "Stop talking HR talk sometimes," like, because I'll just.
She'll say that to you?
Sometimes,
okay.
Right? Not often, but sometimes. Like I'll start using acronyms, and you know, in her mind, it means something else. And but you know, break it down simply, right? And that's the only way you can affect the business is by talking their talk, and doing it in a way that's meaningful to them. And that's the same if you're negotiating a contract. If you're I mean, you have to look at it from the other person's point of view and talk what they're thinking as opposed to what you're thinking.
To show that you understand the circumstances that they're actually in.
Right, and that's beyond business. That's just natural human connection.
But is that taught to HR professionals?
It's not taught enough.
Okay.
I mean, again, was it taught in my class, in my school, in my programs? No. I learned it literally from my first boss. I mean, he cracked me over the head so early and so quickly that I never forgot it, right? So it just is second nature to me to not talk that talk. You know, one, because I don't use a lot of words. I'm going to be done with my words at the end of this interview.
For the whole day.
For the whole day. But I mean, from my perspective, it's about show me results and show me a dashboard, you know, and show me how we're going to get measured. Not in the traditional measures like, you know, what's your turnover, what's your head count? Because if HR folks are looked at as head count jockeys, they're not being value added, you know, because the business is only turning to them when they have an issue with head count or when they have an issue with something like that.
So aside from, I mean, your first example of being able to insource it, even though it costs more because the immediate cost was greater, but the longer term cost that was happening of not being able to serve, that's a good kind of program dashboard piece. And if you can't share some of the other things that you measure kind of on your dashboard, I understand that, but are there other couple of like larger things that you still look at to report to the CEO because it's really important that you can share?
Yeah. I think, and I'll use a couple of basic examples, and they might sound basic, but they're not. So like engagement surveys, you know, very typically, in a lot of times, engagement surveys, they provide a data point, right? Making sure that data point, that should be on every HR person's dashboard. That doesn't mean I'm accountable for the score. The business is accountable for the score. I'm accountable to gathering that. I'm also accountable for my function score, right? How are my people
within
engaged?
HR?
Right.
Yeah.
So, but I'm responsible for delivering the mechanism that we can measure engagement in our business. But making sure what goes into that score is value added. And what I mean by value added is that engagement survey active or passive? Meaning,
tell me more.
Are the questions that we're asking, are they how do you feel? I would classify them as more passive.
Okay.
Versus how do you feel about the business strategy moving forward? That's more of an active thought.
Very specific.
Right, because whatever you're measuring through these surveys or through other mechanisms, you want to make sure that it's tied to where you want to go as a business. Another very simple active question is, would I refer a friend to XYZ company?
It's like the typical NPS question.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what's that rating? And there's quite a few of those questions that are out there, and all the big engagement survey houses do that. But it's about how you structure those surveys to be more active or passive, and are they tied to what your main objectives are as a business? Because for us, we're going through somewhat of a digital transformation with how we deliver from an e-commerce perspective in our North America business. We want to make sure people are tied into what the behaviors are that we're looking for our workforce moving forward, tied to e-commerce.
Go back to something you said though, which I think is fascinating. Is you're responsible, HR was responsible for the mechanism to measure the engagement, but not the engagement score.
Correct.
In my perspective, it seems like HR does measure, and then HR is the one responsible for saying, so we're going to do these 4 things in order to make it happen. Do you agree with that, or do you think it's broader than that?
It's broader than that, because if I'm coming up with the priorities just based on the score, again, it's me coming up with the priorities based on the score.
Yeah.
The power of an engagement survey is, for you as a leader, is you get the score, then I provide the tools by which then we're going to dive deep into that score together through various things, whether it's skip levels or other data analysis or other cuts of data that we can provide, and and then come up with an action plan. That's not like 50 actions. That's the other thing. Like, engagement surveys sometimes result in like 50 to 60 actions globally. Do 3, do 2,
well.
do 1.
Yeah.
Right? Because typically one thing will affect so much other stuff. Because we sometimes get caught up in the sexiness of all these lists that we can have, right? And all these priorities that we have. I'd rather have 4 or 5 things that we do really, really well, as opposed to 50 things that we don't do at all.
Do you think some of that's justification?
Sometimes, yeah, and that's a confidence thing, right? And that's more psychological, right? So that's we can go on tangents about that. And I don't think either of us are qualified to talk about. We might want to get a psychologist.
I'm not a PhD.
Yeah, so you might want to get a PhD next time. But it goes to confidence too. How do you get justification as a person or a leader? Do you get justification through lists and see everything that I'm doing, or do you get justification or you get validation through, here's how I've affected change, right? Here's how I've affected change, and it's been through these 3 or 4 things.
That we're really good at now.
That we're really, really good at, right? And that's what my mantra when I took this role within the company was that. I'm not going to do 50 things. I'm not going to do 10. I'm going to do 5. And we're going to do them really, really well. And once we're done with those 5, we're going to start planning the next 5. Because these 5 now layer on top of that 5, because those 5 are done. Now we're going to do more, and we're more and more and more. And you know what? We come to where we are now, where we're being recognized by our industry as a leader in some of these things that, to somebody who's part of a Google or like more progressive type company, you might say, oh, that's basic. But you know what? It's what affects change in our industry.
In your business,
right?
your industry, your
right.
Your
I'm not going to go do all these other fancy things. I'm going to do what works here, do that awesome, and then do the next 5 things awesome. And it might take more time, but that's what means something to our business. That's what means something to our industry. It's not something that just is the next thing that I'm reading in HR Executive Magazine.
And there's some good stuff in HR Executive Magazine.
Oh, there's great stuff. Oh, yeah. But it's like, but that's not my goal.
No, I get that.
My goal is to deliver, like, our customers are bakers. Our bakers provide sweet baked goods to their customers. We're not making, like innovative AI technology devices. We are making sweet baked goods so that people can eat donuts and be happy and have
all over the world.
All over the world. So it's not rocket science. But again, if you start to go through all the technology, again, I wish I had my chief product officer with me. He'd talk about the technology all day long and have my head spinning. But ultimately, it's making, and actually, when we're talking about how HR affects it, our products are very similar to how HR should function, where we're making it simpler for our bakers to operate, right? So when we provide mixes to our baker, if it's complicated for them to mix that product for their customer, especially in today's world where they can't get labor,
it takes too much.
It takes too much, and they don't want to do it.
Yeah.
So we got to make it simpler, easier for them, as we do as well from an HR perspective. I got to make it simpler for you as a CEO to operate. I got to make sure, everything's moving around you in a way that it's simpler for you to deal with the broader things. right? So I'm here to clear the way.
So let's get a little more tactical, because again, some of these things that keep coming up from an HR perspective, and it's a business
Right.
issue. I mean, let's think about what's going on right now with inflation that HR's got to deal with. Salaries have risen.
The business has to deal with.
Well, I appreciate the fact that that's the way you're looking at it,
Yeah.
right? I'm gonna go back and say HR has to deal with it. Let me just kind of follow. But I agree with you.
Yeah.
So HR's got to deal with the compensation increases, inflation's going up. Now there's this balance of, okay, our costs are going up now on everything. We still got to maintain and retain our people, so we're going to have to pay more salaries, and it's up to HR to figure out the problem here. I know that's not the case. I'm just saying that that's often the way it's presented, both from some HR leader's perspective that provided this to me.
Right.
And you read a couple of the CEO comments that kind of beat it around that bush a little bit too.
Right.
How do you look at that current situation right now from a CPO's perspective and say, here's how we're going to deal with it at company A?
Right. So what we're going to do from our perspective is provide the data and tools that we can collaborate with the business on to make sure our workforce is adequately staffed, adequately rewarded, and is feeling like they belong with Dawn. Because at any company, whether it's Dawn or somewhere else, they want to feel like they belong and they contribute and they're sharing in the success. So you have to develop these tools that will reward people in that fashion. But again, keeping about long-term viability of the company, you also don't want to overinflate wages and other things.
No, how do you operate?
Yeah, you can't operate that way. So it's providing this balance of things that don't add to the long-term cost to the business. Because like when you do like a merit increase, for example, if you do a merit increase of 4% versus your traditional 3%, you're adding 1% more to the base cost that you're going to pay forever for that employee.
Yeah, for sure.
So look at different levers. What are the things that people are more interested in, right? Is it actually money, or is there other things that we can provide from a total rewards perspective that can affect that person's ability to feel comfortable where they're at? And working relationships and home, working from home, remote work, blending that together, this is where, like, if you start forcing people to come back to the office, I know that's a whole other topic for a whole other session.
That's not today.
Yeah.
We're going to do that again, but not today.
I mean, that adds to that person's consumption of inflationary cost, right? So then you have to compensate that person for that. And is that through base salary? Is it through other things that you can do? Or do you just say, you know what, you can work remote and just come in periodically? That way you're not consuming inflationary costs because we're requiring it to do that.
Yeah.
Now, from a frontline perspective, it's what are you doing for me right now, right? Because they have to consume that inflationary cost.
They do.
So we focus our wage programs and how we do things. We try to increase our base wages of our frontline workers, competitively within the market, especially in those areas that are differentiable for us. Like I said, drivers, and all the other folks. We try to again look at competitive wage increases and competitive wages and make some other adjustments, like one-off bonuses, spot bonuses, things like that, or other rewards programs that might help offset the cost of fitness, childcare, stuff like that. So we're looking at other mechanisms too. It's the total. You got to look at it as a total rewards package, as opposed to a very linear thing. Pay people more money,
and they'll stay.
No, it's got to provide people more support from a total rewards perspective, and then go from there.
Do you see that even at some of those I don't mean this in a negative way, but those lower level frontline workers that under a certain dollar amount, do you still see them as being open to total rewards versus just salary?
As long as those baseline wages are kind of like equal, right?
Okay.
Like if I'm in Jackson, Michigan, or if I'm in Louisville, Kentucky, or if I'm in wherever I might be, if I'm making like $19 an hour and down the road I can make $20 an hour, that doesn't work.
You're not competitive.
So we have to make sure our market intelligence is accurate in terms of how we adjust wages, and then after that, once that baseline is hit, then all this other stuff comes into play.
You started your answer again with kind of the same thing of we're going to provide the data and we're going to provide the tools. I mean, that seems to be a big part of your mantra of we're going to tell you where we're at. And so
We're going to make recommendations.
You're going to make recommendations,
right?
but it's ultimately up to the business. So let's just say the business says, I'm sorry, Jason and team, it's great, but we can't afford it anymore. Now what do you do?
Again, I'm going to go back to that other example. So and not only did we make this example, not only did we use this financial model for that recruiting example, we also used it for wages, right? So we had finance folks over the years that have said, you know what, I can't increase wages by X% because it costs me $500,000, whatever. I mean,
Across all those people, the annual cost is.
Right, annual cost. Okay, hear you. Here's where we are in the market. You know, I'm just using this as an example. We're at the 50th percentile. The market for us to get this more competitive or the higher level worker is more in the 70th percentile, right? So we need to do something to increase our wages. I can't afford it. Okay. Now we use the financial model. Okay, how much business are you walking away from because we can't staff those lines? Because that'll offset that cost again like that.
But isn't that hypothetical?
It's not hypothetical, it's real.
Okay.
Because when production says, when supply chain says, I can't fulfill that order because I don't have my line staffed, and that order is $2 million, and all you have to do is increase those wages just a little bit to get those lines staffed, then I can get that business, I can get that business, I can get that business. All that stuff then paid for itself.
You're going back to assuming that they actually know how the business operates and how the business makes money.
That's why
you started with that.
That's why I started with that.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly important to understand, because I think you can tie most things, not all, but you can tie most HR related things, because they're business related things, back to that model of thinking.
Right.
This is what it's going to allow us to do. And if we don't, you lose not just you think you save money, but in fact you're losing a bunch of revenue coming in the door.
Yeah, you might have saved money in the very short term.
Yeah.
And
companies do that.
And you got rewarded for it.
Yeah.
Because you got your bonus.
Yep.
And you got rewarded for it because that's only 12 months long.
People are wondering if the Metas and the Googles and everybody else are doing that right now, laying off all those people in order to maximize their bonus and then turning around to hire them again, which they've done how many times before?
That's why I'm making donuts. That's, But anyway, but again, think about it this way. So again, if you look about all the different aspects of HR, like how does HR add value? Again, at its basis form, if you look at the traditional modes of HR, even if your company is not at that progressive level, is your workforce stable? Right? Is your workforce stable? You can look at some very basic metrics and say, is your workforce stable? Do you have lawsuits? Do you have this, that? Do you have high turnover? Are you walking away from business? That's very easy to quantify right today. That's not complex. And again, for you folks that don't have the relationship from an HR perspective, if you don't have the relationship with the CFOs or your financial colleagues, go get that relationship and start making this analysis, because that's how you're going to add value right away as an HR person.
Completely different conversation.
And even just having the conversation.
Yeah.
I guarantee you, even if you've never had those conversations with people, and then you start having those conversations with people, people are going to be like, man, why are they having this conversation with me?
Yeah.
And it's going to increase your credibility, because it makes you, to use, you're curious now. Like you're curious about Ted Lasso. Be curious. And once you're curious, then all these other things fall into place for you as an HR person, or whatever, or any other service function within the business that's not driving the P&L or selling product. If you're not selling product, you have to add value in some way. And just asking questions or getting out there and seeing what's going on, you're going to add value almost instantaneously. So,
and this wasn't on here, but it kind of aligns with some of this. For some of the folks that are watching you are going to say, I'm just not there. Let's be honest. I don't see the business.
The CEOs or HR people?
Both.
Okay.
But I'm going to say the CHRO, the CPO, CHRO, and they're going to say, hey, we're just not there. We still are caught in kind of the programs of HR, which so many are. They're not bad people. They're wonderfully intentioned folks. And I believe that, and I think you would probably believe that too.
Absolutely.
I get you. If I just say, where would you start? Understand the business first. But I've got an HR team of 50 or 100 people that I've also got to take along with me. Let's just make that assumption. how do you get 50 or 100 people to understand the business? What do you do?
You talk to your CFO or whoever your colleague is from a financial perspective. Talk to them about what you want your business, what you want your function to be, right? And you tell them. I guarantee you, I would be shocked if financial folks won't do this. And if they won't do this, then they need to be educated. But if you tell them, I want my function to learn more about the business. Can you explain or help educate my team at a basic level how the P&L works, who the stakeholders are, right? Because I mean, in our business, in my company specifically, we have a family. You know, from a shareholder perspective, we have those folks to be responsible to from a financial perspective. You know, if you're a public company, you got shareholders that you're accountable to. But help me educate my team and educate me. Be vulnerable a little bit, right? Be vulnerable about your function just a little bit, because what comes out of that is that financial person will talk about, I guarantee they'll talk about the P&L, and then they'll talk about what they need from you, from an HR person.
Yeah.
This is how you affect change as an HR person, right?
We need to see this from the financial perspective.
Right.
So now we're brokering a different conversation.
Right. And even more basic than that, if you want to make it more of an educational thing, beyond just partnering with the CFO to educate your function on how the P&L works and how the business makes money. Ram Charan, what the CEO wants you to know. It's not what the CEO wants HR to know. It's what the CEO wants you to know.
Yeah.
It's this thick. It's a quick read, and it's powerful. It tells a story about how businesses operate and how he learned everything he needs to learn that he learned in business from his family vegetable stand, and then you can apply it, and that you learn the business very easily just by doing a couple different things. I'm not saying you have to be an expert in finance. I'm not saying you have to go get your executive MBA or any of that kind of stuff. I mean, it's very easy to be curious and to get educated.
Well, we got about 3 minutes left, because we could go on and on and on. I got to about eight questions.
I can go on and on.
Yeah, I know you can, but I think we need to save some of this. We'd love to have you back.
Yeah.
Not only to have some additional conversation on some of these topics, but even let's relook at this whole idea of work from home and remote, because it's becoming a bigger issue in a different way now than it was a couple of months ago.
It's more of a challenge, and
it is. But I don't think we're done here. I think we're going to have to extend this on another session if you're willing to come back to continue some of this dialogue.
More than happy.
That we continue to have. I mean, I think you've brought up some really good points, and if folks are watching this and are going to be honest with themselves, I hope they take this and really ask themselves some questions.
Yeah.
Like, am I doing the things that I need to do honestly from an HR and understanding the business first before I start ushering in all these great programs that may have a difference, may make a difference or may not, or there's a perceived lack of making a difference because they don't understand how to tie it to the business. I think that's kind of the golden nugget here.
Yeah, and the thing of it is too is that for everybody, I mean, watching, it's not that difficult. I mean, it start with getting out with your customers, and go out with a sales rep. I jump on trucks. I go out to our plants. I work a line. Do ride-alongs with sales reps. Get out there, be curious, understand how things work, and I guarantee just doing those couple things will make all the difference. You'll change something about what you do today, tomorrow, just by doing that.
I might get my hands dirty if I'm out on the line.
Go get them dirty. Go get them dirty.
I'm being a smart aleck on that one. Right. I agree with you, but
get some calluses working.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. Well, Jason, thank you. It was what I thought it would be in terms of our previous conversations, but it's a topic that keeps coming up, and every time I see one of these surveys that are out there, it's all about the tactical things that need to be done, most of them, as opposed to tying it back to the actual business, and you were able to tie every one of them in one form or another back to the business. I don't think most people could do that.
Like I said, I've been trained well.
You definitely have been mentored the right way, so I appreciate that. Yeah. Well, to all of you that are watching, thank you for joining us at another Leadership Live. Our next event is May 10th. We do have an attorney joining us on that particular one. We have 2 guests joining us on that particular one again. So maybe we get you the one after that to come back and finish this conversation, Jason.
Happy to do it.
If everybody would have it. You'll see an email coming out. It'll be on social media. Please continue to watch. If you have topics that are specific to you, leadership people, that includes all of HR, that includes really the way you've framed it up today, it includes all of business, because you're not going to be able to do it without the people, period. Please make sure you submit it to us. Send it to me via text or on one of our social media pages. If you're watching this, you're seeing that right now. Put the comment. If you want to be on this show at some point, please reach out. We'll have a conversation and see if it makes sense for you to share your ideas on this particular show as well. But Jason, thanks again. It was a pleasure. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you in May.
Thank you.